It was supposed to be another perfect Boxing Day morning. Clear skies, warm sand, families unwrapping gifts. But then, the impossible happened. The ocean vanished, exposing the seabed for miles. Within minutes, water would return faster than a jetliner, over 500 miles per hour, unleashing energy equal to 23,000 Hiroshima bombs and sealing the fate of entire coastlines. What force could erase villages and kill 230,000 people in a matter of hours, yet begin with only a vanishing tide? This is the story of the moment the world nearly ended, told from the first eerie silence onward. Morning sunlight glinted off the Andaman Sea, drawing families and tourists to the shoreline. The air was thick with holiday laughter and the scent of salt. Then, without warning, the ocean began to pull away from the land. At first it was subtle, a gentle withdrawal, as if the tide had changed its mind. But the water kept going, draining away with unnatural speed. Within minutes, the shoreline had doubled, then tripled, exposing stretches of seabed that had not seen daylight in living memory. People stared in disbelief. The sand was littered with stranded fish and coral, glistening in the heat. Children chased after seashells, their parents trailing behind with cameras. Some locals paused, uneasy, but the mood along the beaches was mostly one of wonder. Tourists wandered far out, picking their way over rocks and tidal pools, marveling at the hidden world the ocean had left behind. No one could imagine that this spectacle was anything but a harmless oddity, a story to tell back home. The sea, now a distant line on the horizon, left behind an eerie silence. Boats sat crooked in the mud. Seagulls circled overhead, confused by the sudden emptiness. In these moments, curiosity overpowered caution. The exposed seabed stretched for miles, inviting exploration. The ordinary sounds of a holiday morning faded, replaced by quiet conversations and the crunch of footsteps on wet sand. No one on these beaches had ever seen the water vanish so completely. The warning signs, so obvious in retrospect, were lost in the thrill of discovery. With every minute, more people ventured out, unaware that the ocean's retreat was not a gift, but a countdown. Out beyond the edge of sight, a wall of water was gathering speed, racing back toward the shore at hundreds of miles per hour. Out beyond the horizon, the tsunami had already become a force beyond human scale. Traveling between 500 and 600 miles per hour, faster than a commercial jet, the wave raced across the Indian Ocean, invisible and unstoppable. The energy behind it was almost impossible to grasp. The earthquake that triggered the tsunami released the equivalent of 23,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs in a single violent moment. There was no warning system, no siren, no time to run. For hundreds of miles, the only clue was the vanishing sea. On Mai Khao Beach in Thailand, one 10-year-old girl stood apart from the crowd. Tilly Smith, on holiday from England, watched the water drain away and remembered a geography lesson from 2 weeks earlier. She recognized the signs, frothing water, and the sudden retreat of the tide. Tilly's voice cut through the confusion. She pleaded with her parents to leave the beach, insisting something terrible was coming. At first, her warning seemed impossible. But her conviction convinced others to listen. Her father spoke to a hotel security guard, and a Japanese tourist familiar with the word tsunami backed up her fears. Within minutes, lifeguards began urging people to evacuate. Roughly 100 people left the sand and climbed to higher ground. Moments later, the first wave struck. Where curiosity had pulled people toward the exposed seabed, knowledge now pulled them to safety. Tilly's quick action, powered by a single lesson in a Surrey classroom, saved every life on that stretch of beach. Across the region, the contrast was stark. Most stood defenseless, caught in the path of a disaster moving faster than any car, faster than any warning could travel. On my cow, one child's understanding made all the difference. The physics of the wave were merciless, but on that beach, knowledge was enough to outrun fate. Beneath the calm surface of the Indian Ocean, a rupture was unfolding on a scale almost without precedent. At 7:59 a.m. local time, the boundary between the Indo-Australian and Eurasian plates snapped along the Sunda megathrust. The break stretched for nearly 1,300 kilometers, roughly the distance from New York to Miami, making it one of the longest fault ruptures ever recorded. In less than 10 minutes, trillions of tons of rock lurched as much as 10 meters horizontally and up to 5 meters vertically. The vertical shift alone displaced an estimated 30 cubic kilometers of seawater, enough to fill 12 million Olympic swimming pools. The earthquake registered a magnitude of 9.1, ranking as the third largest since instruments began measuring such events. The energy released was so vast that it equaled the simultaneous detonation of 23,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs. This was not a single jolt, but a two-phase rupture, an initial explosive 400-kilometer break, moving at over 10,000 kilometers per hour, followed by a slower phase that continued northward for another 5 minutes. The violence of the event caused the entire planet to vibrate by 1 centimeter and imperceptibly shortened the length of Earth's day. The mechanics of the rupture created a line source for the tsunami, radiating energy outward in all directions. Along the fault, splay faults acted like underwater levers, thrusting long ridges of seabed upward in seconds and further amplifying the force. The sheer scale and geometry of the rupture determined the tsunami's reach, speed, and destructive power. Above, on the surface, no one could see the underwater violence, but the physics set in motion a disaster that would cross continents, leaving no warning until the water hit land. Along the coastlines of Thailand, Sri Lanka, and India, the world above remained strangely calm. There was no tremor, no trembling glass, no hint of the violence that had just unfolded beneath the sea. The earthquake's epicenter lay hundreds of miles away, buried deep under the Indian Ocean. Its shock waves had torn open the seabed, but on distant shores, the ground stayed still. For families strolling the beaches, the absence of shaking meant there was nothing to fear. Beneath that calm, the physics of disaster were already in motion. The sudden rupture along the Sunda megathrust thrust up a massive wedge of seabed, displacing nearly 30 cubic kilometers of water in an instant. This was not a surface ripple, but a shift so vast it lifted the ocean itself. The water, forced upward, spread outward as an invisible pulse, energy traveling faster than a speeding bullet, yet silent and unseen. No alarms sounded. There were no official warnings, no urgent broadcasts, no reason for anyone to run. The only sign was the vanishing sea, a phenomenon so rare that most mistook it for a quirk of nature. The real warning, the one that might have saved lives, was hidden in physics textbooks and seismic charts, not in the air or underfoot. On the beaches, the ordinary world continued. Children played, couples wandered, and fishermen checked their nets. The true danger remained out of sight, racing toward land with unstoppable force. In that lull, humanity's greatest vulnerability was exposed, not just to nature's power, but to what it could not see, feel, or imagine. The silence shattered in an instant. From the open sea, a sound began to build, low at first, then swelling into a roar so intense it seemed to vibrate through bone. Survivors would later search for words. 1,000 freight trains, the rush of a jet engine, the earth itself screaming. The noise was not just heard but felt, pressing in from all directions, drowning out shouts and sirens. Some covered their ears, others froze, unable to process what was coming. The air itself seemed to pulse with the approach of something vast and unstoppable. Eyes snapped to the horizon. Where blue sky met water, a black line thickened and grew. It was not a wave in any familiar sense, not a curling crest or foamy breaker, but a wall rising straight out of the sea. In places it towered as high as a 10-story building, blocking out the sun and swallowing the coastline in shadow. The shape was jagged, packed with debris, trees, boats, fragments of buildings already claimed by the sea. As the wall came closer, the roar became deafening, a physical force that rattled windows and set car alarms screaming. People ran, but the distance vanished in seconds. The first impact was not a splash, but a collision. Water slamming into concrete, uprooting palm trees, flipping cars and buses as if they weighed nothing. The surge did not stop at the shoreline. It poured over beaches, through hotels, into streets and markets, carrying everything before it. Witnesses described the water as black, thick with mud and broken timber, filled with the sound of shattering glass and twisting metal. Some tried to cling to trees or scramble onto rooftops, but the current tore them away. In a matter of moments, entire neighborhoods disappeared beneath the flood. The sheer scale was impossible to grasp. In places like Khao, the wave reached nearly 65 feet. In Aceh, it rose even higher, swallowing mosques and schools in a single surge. The world that had existed seconds before, with holiday crowds, sunbathers, and fishermen, was erased, replaced by chaos and darkness. The roar faded only after the water had passed, leaving behind a silence broken only by the cries of the injured and the sound of water receding, taking with it the last traces of what had been. Steel and concrete offered no protection. against the force that swept across South Asia. On the coastal rail line just south of Colombo, Sri Lanka, the Queen of the Sea train was packed with families heading home after the Christmas holiday. At 9:30 in the morning, the train halted near Paralia as passengers watched the ocean recede, puzzled by the sudden emptiness. Minutes later, the first wave surged inland, flooding the tracks and surrounding fields. Some passengers climbed onto the roof, hoping to escape the rising water. Then a second, more powerful wave struck. The entire 8-car train, weighing over 1,000 tons, was lifted from the rails and hurled into the trees. Carriages crumpled like tin, windows shattered, and hundreds were swept away in seconds. When the water receded, the train lay twisted in the jungle, its carriages scattered and filled with debris. Rescue workers found bodies tangled in the wreckage and strewn across the paddy fields. Nearly 1,700 people died in that single incident. It was the deadliest train disaster in history, caused by water traveling faster than a hurricane wind. In Aceh, Indonesia, the tsunami left behind its own impossible monument. In the city of Banda Aceh, a fishing boat more than 60 feet long was carried nearly 2 kilometers inland, coming to rest on the roof of a house. The vessel, now stranded in the middle of a residential neighborhood, became a silent witness to the power unleashed that morning. For the people of Aceh, it was more than a curiosity. It was a reminder of the thousands lost, the homes erased, and the lives forever changed in a matter of minutes. The boat remains where the wave left it, a memorial to a force that could move mountains and anything in its path. These are not just stories of destruction, but of scale. A train swept from its tracks, a ship deposited among city streets, each a single tragedy multiplied by hundreds, even thousands. The tsunami's reach was not measured only in water, but in the weight of what it could uproot, carry, and destroy. In the aftermath, these icons stood as proof that nothing, not even the heaviest steel or the most familiar landmarks, could withstand the violence that swept across the land. Across the Indian Ocean, the devastation unfolded on a scale that defied imagination. The tsunami did not stop at the shores of Indonesia or Thailand. It kept moving, crossing open water at jet speed and striking coastlines thousands of miles apart. In Sri Lanka, entire villages vanished. In India, the waves swept away fishing communities along the Coromandel coast. The Maldives, a nation of low-lying coral islands, saw nearly every island flooded, with homes and livelihoods washed away in a matter of minutes. But the destruction did not end in Asia. The waves traveled more than 3,000 miles, reaching the coast of Somalia and even South Africa, where people died hours after the initial earthquake. In Somalia alone, more than 300 people lost their lives, caught off guard by a disaster that had begun on a different continent. Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique all reported casualties and damaged villages, proof that the reach of this event was truly planetary. In total, the tsunami killed over 230,000 people across 14 countries. Each number represents a life, a parent, a child, a friend, swept away by water that arrived without warning. The death toll was so vast that some communities lost entire generations. The scale of loss was matched only by the breadth of the disaster, from the beaches of Indonesia to the ports of East Africa. No coastline facing the Indian Ocean was untouched. The 2004 tsunami stands as the deadliest in recorded history, a single event that connected distant nations in shared tragedy. The earthquake that set the tsunami in motion did more than shatter coastlines and lives. Its violence rippled through the entire planet. Seismologists later confirmed that the force of the rupture caused Earth itself to vibrate by a full centimeter, an entire world ringing like a struck bell. Atomic clocks measured another effect. The planet's rotation sped up slightly, shortening the length of the day by 2.68 microseconds. These are changes on a scale that most disasters never touch. A reminder that the events of that morning were not just local, but planetary. While the ground shook and the sea rose, a different crisis unfolded thousands of miles away in Hawaii. At the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, scientists watched seismic readings spike off the charts. They knew a tsunami was likely racing across the Indian Ocean, but as one scientist later admitted, they had no contacts in the region. They could not warn anyone. Not a single phone number for a hotel in Thailand or for a government office in Sri Lanka. The data was clear, the danger was certain, but the lines of communication simply did not exist. The gap between knowledge and action proved fatal. In the months that followed, this failure became the catalyst for change. International teams began designing a new system from the ground up, a network of seismic sensors, deep ocean buoys, and satellite links, all tied together by protocols for rapid alerts. The Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning System was born, connecting countries that had never shared such data before. Today, alarms can sound within minutes of a major undersea quake, giving millions a chance to reach safety. The memory of a planet that shook and of scientists left helpless with their warnings became the foundation for a system built to ensure that such silence never falls again. Today, over 400 million people live in coastal zones, threatened by tsunamis. Early warning systems now span the Indian Ocean, but nature's force grows as populations crowd the shore. Real preparedness means more than technology. It means remembering what is possible. The next wave will not wait for us to be ready. Stay vigilant, and if this story resonated, share your thoughts below.